He grabbed her hand in front of everyone, not to hold it, but to stop her from walking away. That was the moment Claire Whitmore understood that the man she had agreed to marry was not the man she thought she knew. But that realization came later. What happened first, what broke the entire evening open like a fault line splitting concrete, was the kiss. She kissed a man in a dim hallway at her own engagement party. She kissed him the way a woman kisses someone she trusts completely, without hesitation, without doubt. And when he turned around, she realized she had kissed the wrong man. He looked down at her with eyes that held no anger, no shock, only something quiet and ancient, like a man who had stopped expecting the world to be gentle with him a long time ago. He whispered, barely audible above the music from the ballroom, "Wrong one, Claire. If this story makes you stop and think, what would you have done? Then stay until the end. Hit like, subscribe so you never miss the next story, and drop your city and country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels." The night had started the way most important nights in Claire Whitmore's life started, with her running late and arguing with her own reflection. She stood in the second-floor bathroom of the Callahan estate, pressing a small smudge of eyeliner flat with her ring finger, telling herself this was fine. Everything was fine. The ballroom downstairs held 140 people who had dressed up to celebrate her engagement to Alexander Callahan, and she was hiding in a bathroom she could not figure out how to unlock from the inside. She found the latch after 90 seconds. It was the kind of bathroom where the fixtures cost more than her first car. Claire had grown up in a two-bedroom apartment on the north side of Chicago with her mother, who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility and kept a tally of every dollar borrowed from anyone on a notepad, stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the state of Illinois. She had learned how to stretch a paycheck, how to negotiate her own contracts, how to charge what her work was worth even when clients pushed back. She had built a small interior design firm from a dining table and a laptop in 12 years of not stopping when things got hard. She was not intimidated by money. But the Callahan estate had a way of making her aware of her own hands. What she did with them, how she held a glass, where she put them when she was nervous. Tonight she put them in her pockets, found the zipper had been sewn shut for fashion purposes, and had to settle for clasping them in front of her stomach. Alex was downstairs somewhere. She had seen him 40 minutes ago, shaking hands near the bar, laughing at something his cousin Marcus had said, completely at ease in a room that cost $10,000 to cater. I was good at that. Being at ease. It was one of the first things she had noticed about him. He moved through difficult rooms the way water moved through stone, not forcing anything, just finding the path. She had loved him for that. She still did. She told herself she still did. The staircase at the far end of the East Hall was the one she had used to come up, and she took it back down, one hand trailing the banister, her heels quiet on the carpeting that probably had its own name and country of origin. The hallway at the bottom was narrow by Callahan standards, which meant it was still wider than her living room. Sconces on the walls threw amber light down across the wallpaper, which was dark green and subtly textured, something she had noticed on her first visit and mentally cataloged as Belgian linen pressed under lacquer, a technique that cost more per square foot than most people's monthly rent. She was thinking about wallpaper because thinking about wallpaper was easier than thinking about what she had overheard in the East sitting room 45 minutes ago. Two of Alex's aunts standing near the fireplace, voices low but not low enough. She seems very sweet, not quite what we expected. What did you expect? Someone more prepared for all of this. A pause, and then the sound of ice settling in a glass. She'll learn, or she won't. Claire had stood on the other side of the doorway for 4 seconds before walking in the opposite direction. She had not told Alex. She had gone upstairs, fixed her eyeliner, argued with a bathroom lock, and told herself it didn't matter. It did matter, but she had gotten very good at compartmentalizing the things that mattered. The hallway at the bottom of the east staircase split in two directions. Left went back toward the ballroom and the sound of the string quartet and the smell of the flowers that Alex's mother had chosen. White peonies, which Claire found beautiful in an abstract photographed way, but a little oppressive in person, 100 arrangements of the same flower, suggesting a lack of imagination or an excess of control. She was never sure which. Right went toward the library, the kitchen access corridor, and the older part of the house. She saw him at the end of the hallway. Or she saw a man at the end of the hallway. Dark suit, broad shoulders. his back to her, one hand resting on the newel post at the base of the secondary staircase, head slightly bowed like he was thinking about something that deserved thought. He had Alex's build. The same height, the same way of standing, weight distributed evenly, not leaning, not slouching. Alex had told her once that his brother was almost exactly his height, which she had filed away as a piece of information that didn't yet have a context. She had not yet found that context. She was crossing the hallway toward him before she fully decided to. That was the honest version. She was moving toward what she thought was her fiancé, already composing the sentence in her head. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. And the amber light was behind her, and it was the kind of dark that makes familiar shapes look slightly unfamiliar. And she was tired, and she was a little off balance from the aunt's conversation, and she hadn't eaten since noon. She came up beside him, and she put her hand on his arm, and she turned her face up toward his, and she kissed him. Not a long kiss. Not a dramatic one. The kind of kiss you give someone you've been kissing for 2 years, easy and warm, and carrying the shorthand of a relationship inside it. He went completely still, not stiff, not rigid with offense or alarm. Still. The way a man goes still when something happens that he wasn't expecting, and he's choosing very carefully what to do next. She felt it in the half-second before she opened her eyes. Something was wrong. She pulled back. He turned toward her slowly, and the light caught his face, and Claire Whitmore's heart did something complicated and anatomically significant. It was not Alex. The features were similar, same jaw structure, same dark hair, same kind of bone architecture that came from the Callahan side of the family. But the eyes were different, darker, more guarded in a way that spoke of a longer and less forgiving education. Vincent Callahan looked at her. She looked at Vincent Callahan. The string quartet was playing something Italian in the ballroom 30 feet and a wall away. He said quietly, "Wrong one, Claire." Not unkind, not mocking, just factual. Giving her the information she needed in the fewest words possible, which she would later understand was simply how he operated. She stepped back. She felt heat moving up through her chest into her face, the full-body embarrassment of someone who has made a mistake that cannot be unmade, only survived. "I thought," she started. "I know," he said. I didn't, I know that too." He was not looking at her with triumph or cruelty, or the particular expression she had seen on men's faces when women made themselves accidentally vulnerable. He was looking at her with something much harder to categorize. Not pity, not interest exactly. Something more like recognition. The look of someone who understood what it meant to be in a position you didn't choose and had to navigate anyway. "This doesn't need to be," she said, and stopped, because she didn't know how to finish that sentence. "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." He adjusted the cuff of his jacket. One small, deliberate motion. Then he nodded at her, once, and walked in the other direction, toward the library, and disappeared. Claire stood in the hallway for 8 seconds. She counted them without meaning to. Then she smoothed her dress, squared her shoulders, and walked back toward the ballroom. She found Alex at the bar, holding 2 glasses of champagne, looking for her. His face, when he spotted her, was the face she had chosen. Open. Relieved. Uncomplicated. He held out one of the glasses, and she took it, and he kissed her temple and said, "Where did you disappear to? Marcus wants to get a photo with us." "Bathroom," she said. "I got turned around on the way back." He accepted this completely. That was Alex. He took her at her word because he trusted her, and because it would never occur to him to look for a lie in a statement that small. She smiled and followed him toward Marcus and his wife, and she smiled in the photographs, and she talked to his aunts when they came to give their congratulations, and she drank exactly 1.5 glasses of champagne over the next 2 hours while the party moved around her like weather. Vincent appeared at the edge of the ballroom 40 minutes later. He was talking to a man she didn't recognize, older, Italian-looking, the kind of face that didn't smile often enough for smiling to look natural on it. Vincent stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes on the conversation, and he never once looked in her direction, or if he did, she didn't catch it. She did not look in his direction either. She looked at him exactly 3 times over the rest of the evening, and each time she made herself look away after 2 seconds. Alex had told her about Vincent in pieces, the way you tell someone a story that doesn't have a clean shape. The first piece, Vincent was his half-brother. Their father, Robert Callahan, had an affair before Alex was born. The woman, her name was never used in these conversations, which Claire noticed, had a son. That son was Vincent. Robert acknowledged him when Vincent was 13, brought him into the family structure in a way that was acknowledged by legal documents but not by warmth. The second piece, Vincent had been raised outside the family, which meant he had built himself from scratch without the resources or the safety net that Alex had grown up taking for granted. He was 12 years older than Alex. By the time Alex was old enough to understand the family dynamics, Vincent was already an adult who had learned to navigate the world without asking for help. The third piece, which Alex gave her with a careful neutrality that suggested it was more complicated than he was making it sound. Vincent ran the operational side of the family business, not the public side, not the real estate development and the charitable foundations and the investment portfolios that the Callahans presented to the outside world. The other side, the side that the outside world was not invited to examine. Claire had grown up in Chicago. She understood what the other side meant. She had not walked away from Alex when he told her. She had asked questions, and he had answered them with the same careful neutrality, and eventually she had arrived at a place where she understood that loving Alex meant existing in proximity to things she would not look at directly, and that this was the bargain she was making. She had made it consciously. She was not naive, but standing in that ballroom with Vincent Callahan 30 feet away, she found herself renegotiating the terms of the bargain in a way she hadn't expected and couldn't quite stop. The party ended at midnight. The last guests filtered out through the main entrance while staff moved quietly through the rooms collecting glasses and folding napkins. Alex's mother, Margaret Callahan, pressed Claire's hands between hers and said she was so pleased, and Claire said she was too, and both of them were performing versions of themselves that were mostly but not entirely accurate. Alex drove them back to his apartment, the one in Lincoln Park that he'd been in for 4 years, that Claire had gradually colonized with throw pillows and a specific brand of hand soap and the framed print of a Venice canal that she'd bought at a street market when she was 26 and had moved with her through 3 apartments because it reminded her that the world was bigger than whatever small thing was currently making it feel small. She had not told him. She stood at the bathroom sink washing her face and told herself again that there was nothing to tell. It was an accident, a case of mistaken identity and bad lighting. It lasted less than 3 seconds. Vincent had handled it with a discretion that she hadn't expected and was still slightly off balance by. There was nothing to tell. She pressed a towel to her face and looked at herself in the mirror and had the sudden, unpleasant feeling that she was looking at someone who was in the early stages of constructing a lie she hadn't fully chosen to tell yet. She put the towel down. She went to bed. Alex was already half asleep, and he reached for her hand in the dark the way he always did, and she let him take it. She did not sleep for a long time. She kept replaying it. Not the kiss, or not only the kiss. The 3 seconds after. The way he had gone still without flinching. The way he'd said wrong one without making it into something she needed to apologize for or defend herself against. The recognition in his eyes that she still couldn't categorize correctly. She had been kissed by accident before. Wrong person, wrong moment. It happened. What she'd never experienced was the aftermath being handled with that kind of economy. No drama. No extraction of her embarrassment for his own use. Just acknowledgement, and then the merciful closing of the subject. It was not how she'd expected the feared head of the Callahan operation to behave. She did not know what she'd expected. Something louder, probably. Something that made more use of the power he clearly had. At 2:14 in the morning, she turned onto her side and stared at the window and admitted to herself, in the dark, in the specific privacy of a thought that doesn't yet have words, that in the moment before she'd opened her eyes, before she'd registered that anything was wrong, she had not wanted to stop. She lay with that for about 40 seconds. Then she decided she was going to need to think about something else for the foreseeable future. 3 days later, Alex proposed properly. Not the ring. The ring had happened at the party, presented in a moment that had been photographed and celebrated. What he did 3 days later was different. He cooked dinner in his apartment, which he did badly but earnestly, and he told her about the life he wanted to build with her. Not the Callahan life, not the estate and the expectations and the aunts who measured people by their capacity for preparation. His life. A house somewhere quieter, maybe a dog. The kind of life where the hardest decision on a Sunday morning was where to get coffee. She listened to him describe it, this quiet life, and she thought, I love this man. She was sure of it. It was not complicated. It was not in doubt. She also thought, and this she did not say, that she was not sure the life he was describing was a life he was actually free to choose. Not with the family he'd been born into, not with the operational structures his brother ran that made the Callahan name mean something specific on certain streets in this city. But she did not say it. She smiled and touched his face and told him she wanted that too. She was not lying. She wanted it to be true. That was close enough for now. The second time she saw Vincent was 14 days later, at a smaller family gathering, a Sunday dinner that Alex's mother hosted with the warm authoritarian efficiency of a woman who had run a large and difficult household for 30 years and found the difficulty bracing rather than depleting. There were 12 people at the table. Claire sat beside Alex. Vincent sat across from them, 2 seats down, next to an uncle whose name she kept forgetting. He did not acknowledge the hallway. He did not acknowledge her with anything more than the same brief, courteous nod he gave everyone when he arrived. He ate with the economy of someone who treated meals as fuel rather than events, and he answered direct questions with direct answers and did not volunteer anything additional. Alex's mother asked him about his trip to New York. Fine, he said. And the Delacroix situation? This from the uncle. A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Resolved. No one asked for elaboration. No one looked like they needed it. Claire noticed that when Vincent spoke, however briefly, the table adjusted to him without appearing to. The pitch of other conversations dropped by half a register. People's attention moved toward him and then quickly away, like they'd looked at a light source directly and were correcting. Alex did not seem to notice this. Or if he did, he had grown up enough around it that it no longer registered as notable. When the dinner was over and people were moving toward the living room, Claire stayed to help carry plates, and she found herself alone in the doorway to the kitchen for a moment when Vincent passed through. He stopped. She did not look up immediately. Then she did. The room's different, he said. I wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the far wall of the dining room, which had been repainted in the past few weeks. She hadn't known anyone had noticed. Benjamin Moore, she said. It's called Why the Blue. It was this or the original yellow, which wasn't doing the crown molding any favors. He looked at the crown molding. No, he said. It wasn't. He walked through to the kitchen. Claire stood in the doorway holding 2 plates and had the distinct and inconvenient thought that she would like to know what else Vincent Callahan noticed that he didn't bother to mention. She walked to the kitchen, handed the plates to the housekeeper, and went to find Alex. That was the moment she started paying attention to the wrong thing. She did not recognize it as such, not yet. She told herself it was nothing, professional curiosity, the habit of an interior designer who could not stop cataloging what people noticed and didn't notice in the rooms she built. She told herself the conversation had lasted 11 seconds and meant absolutely nothing. She told herself a lot of things, standing at the edge of that kitchen doorway, while the dinner plates clattered quietly and the sound of Alex's laughter came from the living room. She almost believed all of it. Almost. The plates were still warm when Claire walked back into the living room, and she spent the next 40 minutes reminding herself to listen to what Alex was saying. He was talking about the honeymoon, Greece maybe, or the Amalfi Coast, something with water and light and no agenda, he said, which was exactly the kind of sentence that made her love him. This man who ran quarterly reviews and managed 7-figure property negotiations, and still thought about honeymoons in terms of no agenda and meant it completely sincerely. She nodded. She said Greece sounded beautiful. She meant that too. But some part of her brain was still standing in the dining room doorway, holding plates that were too heavy, thinking about what a man who did not waste words had chosen to spend 2 of them on. Why the blue? He had read the color, not the mood it was meant to create, not the general impression, the specific color, which meant he had looked at it long enough and carefully enough that he could tell it was not the original paint, and that the change had been deliberate, and that whoever made the change had done it for a reason worth thinking about. Most people in that room had not noticed the wall had been repainted at all. She pressed her thumb against the inside of her engagement ring, a small habit she'd developed in the past 2 weeks, feeling the slight ridge where the setting met the band, using it as a kind of reset. You are here. This is real. Pay attention to what is actually happening. Alex touched her knee. You okay? Tired, she said. Long week. He accepted this with the easy generosity of someone who believed her and went back to talking about the Amalfi Coast, and she listened better this time. She was very good at course corrections. She had been doing them her whole life. The office she rented in Wicker Park was on the second floor of a building that smelled like coffee from the espresso bar downstairs and old wood from the floors that hadn't been refinished since the 90s. She had two junior designers who worked from a shared table near the window and a separate room in the back where she met with clients and kept her sample books and did the kind of focused thinking that required a door she could close. She was in the back room on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after the Sunday dinner, with fabric samples spread across her work table and a site plan for a Gold Coast townhouse pinned to the wall, when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer it. She had a policy about unknown numbers during work hours. But something, she would not be able to explain this later, not to anyone's satisfaction, including her own, made her pick up. "Ms. Whitmore." Not a question. She recognized it the way you recognize a piece of music you've only heard once, not immediately, not with certainty, but with the specific unease of something familiar arriving in an unexpected context. "Vincent," she said, a beat. "I need to speak with you about something that isn't family business. I'd prefer to do it in person, not at the estate and not anywhere Alex would be." Her hand tightened on the phone. "Why not at the estate?" "Because what I need to say is about Alex, and I'd rather say it to you first." The site plan on the wall blurred slightly. She blinked. "Is he in trouble?" "Not the kind you're thinking of." A pause that felt measured, not uncertain. "There's a cafe on Damon, Hendricks. Do you know it?" "Yes." "Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. I'll be at the back table." He hung up without asking if she was available, without saying please, without doing any of the social softening that people used to make requests feel less like directives. She put the phone down on her work table. She looked at the fabric samples. She went back to work. She did not sleep well that night. Hendricks was the kind of cafe that attracted people who needed to work quietly and didn't want to be noticed doing it. Small tables pushed far enough apart to allow conversation without broadcasting it. Ambient noise calibrated by years of accidental acoustics rather than design. Good coffee served without theater. She arrived at 9:58. He was already there. Back table. Facing the door. Of course facing the door. He had a cup of black coffee and nothing else, and he watched her cross the room without changing expression. She sat down across from him and did not take off her coat. Leaving it on felt like retaining an option. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You didn't give me a lot of room to decline." "No, I didn't." He looked at her steadily. "I'm going to tell you something about my brother that he should have told you himself. You should know that I'm telling you because I think you deserve to make an informed decision, not because I'm trying to influence what that decision is." Her coffee hadn't arrived yet. She wished it had. She needed something to do with her hands. "Okay." Alex has been having conversations with the Chicago PD. The ambient noise of the cafe went on exactly as before. Someone's espresso machine ran its cycle. A chair scraped. "What kind of conversations?" she said. Her voice was level. She was proud of that. "The kind that don't get disclosed to the family." Vincent's hands were flat on the table. Still. "I found out 3 weeks ago. I've been deciding what to do about it since." "You're saying he's cooperating with police?" She said it flatly. Not a question, confirming she understood the words. "I'm saying he's been meeting with a detective named Farrow from the Organized Crime Unit twice in the past 2 months." "I don't know what he said. I don't know what they've offered him." He looked at her. "I do know that if this continues and the family finds out before I've had a chance to manage it, the consequences for Alex would be significant, and you are engaged to him, which means you are standing in a position you may not have agreed to stand in." She sat with that for a moment. The kind of moment that has a specific texture, dense, resistant, the feeling of being handed a weight you weren't braced for. "Why are you telling me?" she said. "Why not just manage it, the way you manage everything?" Something moved across his face. Not quite discomfort, more like the adjustment of a man who has been asked to be more transparent than he's accustomed to being. "Because managing it means Alex stops. And the way I make Alex stop may not be a conversation you want to have happen to the man you're about to marry without knowing it happened." "What does that mean, the way you make him stop?" It means having a conversation that makes very clear what the alternative looks like. He looked at her. It isn't violence, Miss Whitmore. I want to be accurate about that. But it's not gentle either. She looked at his hands on the table. She thought about Alex, about the careful neutrality when he talked about the family, the way he described a quiet life with a dog and Sunday mornings with coffee, the way he reached for her hand in the dark. Does he know you know? She said. No. So you came to me first? Yes. Why? He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, because you're not family, which means you still have a choice about whether to be. She felt something happen in her chest. Not dramatic, not the movie version of Revelation, where everything clarifies at once. More like the slow, grinding shift of something that has been slightly out of alignment for a long time and has finally moved far enough to be undeniable. You're telling me to leave, she said. I'm telling you that you're standing in a complicated position and you should understand its dimensions before you make it permanent. He picked up his coffee cup, set it down again without drinking. What you do with that information is entirely yours. The coffee arrived. The waitress set it down and disappeared. Claire wrapped both hands around the cup and let it be warm. What are you going to do? She said. About Alex. Talk to him, tonight, probably. And if he won't stop? Vincent's jaw tightened by a fraction. Then I manage the situation a different way. Which protects the family. Which protects Alex, he said, and the correction was quiet, but it landed clearly. The family can take the exposure better than he can. She looked at him across the table and understood something she hadn't expected to understand. This man did not want to use the power he had. He was using it because the alternative was his brother getting hurt badly by people less careful with their methods. And he had decided that an uncomfortable conversation with a woman across a cafe table was preferable to what came after if he didn't have it. It was not a kind calculation, but it was a human one. You knew, she said, before you called me, that I'd come. I thought you would. Because? He looked at her with those dark, careful eyes. Because you're the type of person who would rather know a hard thing than not know it, even when knowing it is worse. She looked at her coffee. She thought about the notepad on her mother's refrigerator, the tally of every borrowed dollar. Yeah, she said. I am. She did not tell Alex about the meeting. She told herself this was because she needed time to decide what to do with the information, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth included the fact that she did not know how to have a conversation with Alex that began, your brother told me something without immediately also including your brother, asked me to meet him alone, and I went. And she was not ready to have that second conversation. She worked the rest of the day. She went home. She cooked something she didn't taste. She watched Alex eat it across the kitchen island and talk about a property negotiation that had hit a snag. And she nodded in the right places, and she cleaned up while he was on a call in the other room. And she stood at the sink with the water running and let herself be honest with herself for 30 seconds. She was not angry at Alex. That was the first thing. She understood, in a way that surprised her, why he had done it. He was a man who had grown up watching the family he was born into operate in ways he didn't choose and couldn't control. And at some point, he had made a decision. She recognized. To try to change the terms from the inside, or at least protect himself from what the outside would eventually do. She could not call that cowardly. She was not sure she could call it brave either. She could call it the decision of someone who had run out of better options and grabbed the one available. The second thing, she was frightened for him. Not for herself. For him. Because she now understood that the people who would hurt him if this went wrong were not abstract. They were the uncle whose name she kept forgetting, and the men who didn't smile easily, and the entire operational weight of a family that had survived 60 years in Chicago, by being extremely clear about what happened when someone became a liability. The third thing, and this was the one she didn't look at directly, the one she let sit in her peripheral vision while she focused on the first two, was that the person who had told her all of this, and told her in the most straightforward way he could, was not her fiancé. 3 days later, Alex came home with tension in his shoulders that he was trying to carry quietly. She noticed it in the way he set his keys down, too carefully, which meant his hands were unsteady, and he was compensating. She noticed it in the way he poured a glass of water and drank half of it standing at the counter before acknowledging she was in the room. "Long day?" she said. "Vincent called me in." He turned around. His face was doing the thing it sometimes did, the thing where all the machinery behind his eyes was running at full capacity and he was managing the output with whatever was available. "We had a conversation." She kept her expression neutral. She had rehearsed this. "About what?" He looked at her for a moment that lasted slightly too long. "Family business. Nothing you need to worry about." Nothing you need to worry about. She had heard him say that phrase a dozen times in 2 years, and it had never bothered her before the way it bothered her now. The small, unconscious condescension of it. The assumption that her role was to be protected from complexity rather than trusted with it. "You sure?" she said. "Yeah." He came over and kissed her forehead, and she let him, and he went to change out of his suit. She stood in the kitchen and felt the shape of what she hadn't said pressing against the inside of her ribcage like a hand pushing from the wrong side of a door. The argument started 2 nights later, and it started about nothing. It started because he had moved her design notebooks from the dining table to the bookshelf, which she had asked him not to do because the order they were in was a system she had developed over 6 years, and it looked like chaos, but it wasn't. And he had moved them with the genuinely helpful intention of clearing the table for dinner and hadn't understood why the result was a problem. She knew, even as she was explaining this with a sharpness that was a half measure too sharp, that she was not really talking about the notebooks. He knew it too. "What is going on with you?" he said. Not aggressive, not defensive yet. Genuinely asking, the way a person asks when they've been feeling a distance they can't measure. "I'm tired," she said. "You keep saying that." "Because I keep being tired." "Claire." He put his hand on the counter between them, not reaching for her, just placing it there, present. "Something has been wrong for 2 weeks. I'm not imagining that." She looked at his hand on the counter. She thought about Vincent saying, "I'm telling you because I think you deserve to make an informed decision." She thought about Alex saying, "Nothing you need to worry about." "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. He went very still. "Tell you what?" The stillness told her everything. "About the detective," she said. "Pharaoh, the organized crime unit." She watched his face go through 3 things in rapid sequence. Shock, then the calculation of denial, then the slow, exhausted collapse of a man who has been holding something heavy for too long and just lost the grip. "Alex, why didn't you tell me?" The kitchen was quiet. He pulled out a chair and sat down, heavily, like his legs had made the decision without consulting the rest of him. "How do you know that name?" he said. "It doesn't matter how. It matters to me." He looked up at her. His eyes were tired in a way she hadn't seen before, or hadn't let herself see. It was Vincent. She didn't confirm or deny it. He exhaled, long and ragged. He pressed his hand flat against the table. "I was going to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for 2 months. 2 months? She repeated. "I know. Alex, we got engaged 2 months ago." He closed his eyes. "I know." She pulled out the other chair and sat across from him. The table between them felt like geography. Not huge, but meaningful. "Tell me now," she said. "All of it." He told her. It took 40 minutes and 2 glasses of water and several stops where he had to find the right words, or the courage to use the words he had. The contact with Pharaoh had started as something he'd understood as routine, a conversation that had been framed to him as simply providing context, harmless, the kind of interaction that people on the periphery of the family had all the time without consequence. But it hadn't stayed routine. Pharaoh was building something. Alex had understood that after the second meeting. What he hadn't done, at the point where he understood it, was stop. "Why not?" she said. He looked at her across the table, and in his face she saw something she recognized because she had felt a version of it herself. The look of someone who has imagined a different life for so long that when a door opens toward it, they go through the door before they think about what's on the other side. "Because he told me there was a way out," Alex said. "A way to be done with all of it, the family, the business, all of it, and I wanted to believe him." She sat with that. "And now?" she said. "Now Vincent knows." He looked at the table. "So there's no out anymore. There's just the conversation we're having right now." "What did Vincent say to you when he called you in?" Alex was quiet for a moment. He told me to stop. He said if I stopped now, he could manage the exposure. He said no one else in the family needed to know. He looked up. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Maybe he was, she said. Alex's expression shifted. Not anger, something more complicated. He's protecting the operation, Claire. Not me. I don't think that's the only reason, she said, and then immediately wasn't sure why she'd said it or where it had come from, and saw from the way Alex's eyes sharpened that he'd noticed. He talked to you, Alex said, slowly. He didn't just find out and call me in. He talked to you first. She did not answer that. Claire, his voice had changed, lower, not threatening, just stripped down to something more fundamental than the version he usually used with her. Did my brother ask to meet you alone? The question landed the way a stone lands in still water, everything moving outward from it, concentric and unstoppable. She held his gaze. She thought about the hallway at the engagement party. She thought about Hendrik's cafe and Vincent's hands flat on the table, and you're the type of person who would rather know a hard thing than not know it. She thought about the 8 seconds she'd counted in the dark after she'd walked away from the wrong man. Yes, she said. The words sat between them in the kitchen. Alex did not yell. She would have preferred, in some way, if he had yelled. Anger was a shape she could work with, an emotion that had edges and boundaries and wore itself out. What he did instead was go very quiet, in the way that some men go quiet when they are trying to contain something that doesn't want to be contained, and he looked at her for a long time with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not rage. Something older and colder than rage. How long ago? He said. 4 days. And you didn't tell me? No. Why? She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Because I needed to figure out what it meant first. What it meant. He repeated it like a man tasting something unfamiliar. What did it mean, Claire? He told me about Pharaoh because he thought I should know before I made things permanent. She kept her voice even. I think he was trying to give me a choice. A choice. Alex stood up from the chair. Not abruptly, slowly, with the deliberate control of a man managing the way his body moved. My brother gave you a choice about our engagement. He didn't tell me to leave. He called you, alone, without telling me. And he sat across from you in a room that I wasn't in, and he talked to you about our relationship. The control was thinning. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his hands had found his pockets. That's not managing a situation, Claire. That's something else. Alex said, Did anything happen? The question was quiet, direct. The kind of question that has already considered all the possible answers and is just waiting to hear which one applies. No, she said. And then, because she had told herself she was going to stop building structures made of partial truths. But something happened before, at the party. She watched him understand. It was not an instantaneous process. It moved across his face in stages, each one worse than the last. Confusion, rearrangement, and then the slow, terrible arrival of a man at the place he has been dreading without knowing what shape it would take when he got there. The hallway, he said. Yes. You kissed him. I thought he was you. I didn't know. But you kissed him. Yes. His kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a car moved through the street. Somewhere in the building, music was playing through a shared wall. Something low and rhythmic, completely indifferent to what was happening in this room. Alex looked at her. She looked back at him. She did not look away, because looking away would be a kind of mercy she hadn't earned and didn't feel entitled to offer herself. Why are you telling me this now? He said, after 3 weeks. Because you asked me a direct question, and I'm not going to lie to you. But you could have told me 3 weeks ago. Yes. And you didn't. No. He nodded once. The nod of a man processing information his body is not yet ready to accept. Was it? He started and stopped. He tried again. When you realized it wasn't me, was there any part of... He stopped again. And she realized he could not finish the question because finishing it meant standing in a doorway he was not sure he wanted to open. She thought about lying. She genuinely considered it for approximately 4 seconds, because the honest answer to the question he had not finished asking was the kind of answer that changed the shape of everything. And she was not sure changing the shape of everything was what she wanted. She was sure it was what she owed him. There was a moment, she said, before I realized. There was a moment where I didn't know, and I didn't stop. She kept her eyes on his face. I'm not telling you something happened. I'm telling you there was a second where something could have, and I didn't pull back from it on my own. He turned away from her. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her, his hands in his pockets, looking out at the street below, and she sat at the kitchen table and let him have the silence. It lasted a long time. When he turned around, his face was different, closed in a way she had never seen it. The easy openness that she had loved, the thing that had made her feel, in 100 small moments over 2 years, that here was someone who didn't need to perform being fine because he actually was gone, and in its place was something careful and armored and exhausted. I need you to leave tonight, he said. I'm not saying it's over. I'm saying I need you to not be here right now. She nodded. She stood up. She got her coat from the hook by the door, and she got her bag from the bedroom, and she stood at the front door for a moment. Alex, she said. He was still at the window. I'm sorry, she said. Not for telling you. For not telling you sooner. He did not answer. She opened the door and went out into the hallway, and the door closed behind her with the soft, final sound of a latch catching, which was so much quieter than anything she had imagined this moment would sound like. She stood in the corridor of his building for a moment. The overhead light buzzed faintly. Somewhere down the hall a television was on. She pressed the elevator button. She thought, this is the point where things do not go back. Not because of what she'd done. Not entirely. But because she had finally stopped building things out of partial truths and the structure that had stood on them. The careful, beautiful, almost perfect structure of the life she'd been constructing for 2 years had shifted under its own weight, and the shifting had not stopped, and she did not think it was going to stop on its own now that it had started. The elevator opened. She got in. The doors closed, and for a moment she stood alone in the small bright box of it, moving downward, and she thought about Vincent Callahan standing at the end of a hallway with his hand on a newel post, not turning around, not knowing she was there. That particular stillness, that particular quality of a man who had taught himself to occupy a room without expecting anything from it. The elevator reached the ground floor. She walked out into the Chicago night, and the air was cold, and she did not have a plan, and for the first time in a very long time, she did not immediately try to make one. She walked 4 blocks before she realized she had no destination. Not a temporary absence of plan, the actual structural absence of a place to go. Her apartment, the one she had kept after moving most of her things to Alex's, had been sublet 6 weeks ago to a graduate student named Priya, who was quiet and paid on time and had sent a photo of the succulent she'd bought for the windowsill as if to demonstrate responsible tenancy. Claire had thought that was charming at the time. She did not find it charming now. She stopped on the sidewalk outside a dry cleaner that was closed, its window dark, the plastic-wrapped garments on the rack inside visible as pale shapes in the streetlight, and she stood there with her bag over one shoulder and her coat buttoned wrong. She'd done it in a hurry, standing at Alex's door. And she counted what she had. Her workroom in Wicker Park had a couch. It was a client presentation couch, a deep olive velvet thing she'd chosen because it photographed beautifully and made clients feel like they were in the kind of space where good decisions got made. It was also, technically, a place a person could sleep. She called a car and rode to Wicker Park in the dark and let herself into the building with her key and climbed the stairs and unlocked the office and turned on the small lamp on the corner table, which threw the room into a warm, low light that she had specifically calibrated for client comfort and now found herself grateful for in a way that had nothing to do with clients. She sat on the velvet couch. She did not cry. She thought she might in the elevator, but the feeling had retreated somewhere interior and was sitting there quietly, waiting. She thought about calling her mother. She looked at the time, 11:43. Her mother woke at 5:15 for a shift that started at 6. She put the phone face down on the cushion beside her. She lay down on the couch with her coat still on and stared at the ceiling, which she had painted a very specific off-white called distant gray, that read as almost white in daylight and something closer to bone at night. And she thought about nothing carefully and deliberately for as long as she could manage, which was approximately 11 minutes. Then she thought about Alex's face at the window, the way it had closed. Then, before she could stop it, she thought about Vincent saying, "You're the type of person who would rather know a hard thing than not know it." And the way he had said it without softening it, without turning it into a compliment or a consolation, just stating it. The way he stated most things. Like the facts were enough and decoration was a form of disrespect. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep for a long time. Alex did not call the next day. She had not expected him to. She had known, walking out of his building, that he would need days rather than hours. He was not a person who processed things quickly, not the important things. He turned them over. He lived with them. He came to conclusions slowly and held them firmly. What she had not expected was Vincent. He appeared at her office at 2 in the afternoon, which she discovered because her junior designer, Keiko, knocked on the backroom door and said, with the careful neutrality of someone who had briefly seen Vincent Callahan's face and was still recalibrating, "There's a man here. He says he knows you." Claire set down the pencil she was holding. "Send him in." Vincent came through the door and closed it behind him and looked at the room with the brief, comprehensive look he gave every space. Inventory, not admiration. Then he looked at her. "Alex called me this morning," he said. She waited. "He told me what you said, about the hallway." He did not sit down. He stood with his hands at his sides, which on most people would read as neutral, and on him read as a man who has made a decision about how much space to take up. "He's not angry at you. He told me to leave." "I know. He's also not angry at you," Vincent said again, with a slight emphasis that clarified the sentence. The anger, whatever there was of it, had a different address. She understood. "He's angry at you." "Yes." She looked at her work table. The site plan was still pinned to the wall from yesterday, the townhouse on the Gold Coast that suddenly felt very far away. "What did he say?" "That I had no right to contact you without his knowledge." A brief pause. "He's not wrong about that. Then why did you?" He looked at her with those careful dark eyes. "Because the alternative was you marrying him without knowing that he was in the middle of something that could have blown up in ways that would have affected you directly. And I decided that your safety was more important than the protocol of who tells whom what in this family. And if I'd gone to Alex first, after you called me, then Alex would have handled it." He said it simply, no defensiveness. "And you still would have had the information." "But you didn't trust him to give it to me." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't trust the timing. There's a difference." She stood up from her chair and moved to the window, not because she needed to look outside, but because the room was small, and she needed a direction that wasn't directly at him. "Why are you here, Vincent? Right now? Today?" "To tell you that whatever you decide about Alex, about the engagement, I didn't mean for you to be in the middle of something between him and me. That was not the intention. You said that at the cafe, that you weren't trying to influence my decision. I meant it." "Then what was the intention?" She turned around. "Because I've been thinking about it for 24 hours and I can't make it be purely practical. A man who runs what you run doesn't make decisions out of uncomplicated concern for his brother's fiancé's informational rights." Something happened in his face. Small, controlled, but there. The adjustment of a man who has been accurate about himself and does not particularly enjoy it. "No," he said. "It wasn't uncomplicated." The room was very quiet. "I need you to leave," she said. Not the way Alex had said it, not with pain inside it. Just, this conversation has reached a place where continuing it is not something she is equipped to do right now. "Please." He nodded once. He went to the door and opened it, and then he stopped with his hand on the frame. "The detective," he said. "Pharaoh. I need you to know that I've managed the exposure. Alex is safe. Whatever he told Pharaoh, it's been contained. No one in the family is going to find out." He did not look at her when he said this. He spoke it to the edge of the door. "He's safe." He left. She stood at the window for a long time after that, looking at the traffic on Damen, and she thought about a man who handled the kind of things Vincent Callahan handled, who could contain police exposure like it was a logistical problem rather than a crisis. Saying he's safe with the flat urgency of someone for whom safety was not an abstract concept. She thought about what it cost him to come here and say it. She picked up her pencil and went back to work. And she was very careful, for the rest of that afternoon, not to think about what any of it meant. The call came on a Thursday. It was not Alex. It was Margaret Callahan, which was worse, the voice of a woman who did not make unnecessary calls and did not use words imprecisely, coming through Claire's phone at 8 in the morning while she was standing in the kitchen of the Wicker Park office with a cup of coffee she'd made on the small pour-over setup she kept on the counter. "I'd like to have breakfast," Margaret said. "Just the two of us. Is Saturday morning possible?" It was phrased as a question. It was not a question. "Yes," Claire said. "Of course." The restaurant Margaret chose was in the Gold Coast, the kind of place that opened at 7 and served perfect eggs to people who had the kind of schedules that made 7 a reasonable breakfast hour. White tablecloths, no music, the ambient sound of cutlery and muted conversation, and the specific quality of a room where people came to conduct business while appearing to share a meal. Margaret was already seated when Claire arrived. She looked, as she always did, like a woman who had made deliberate choices about every component of her appearance and was entirely satisfied with the results. Silver hair cut close, a silk blouse in navy, good pearl earrings that were not ostentatious enough to be the first thing you noticed and not understated enough to be the second. She waited until the coffee was poured and the waiter had retreated before she said anything. "I know about the detective," she said. Claire set her coffee cup down carefully. "I know about Pharaoh, and I know what Alexander has been doing for the past 3 months." Margaret's voice was level. Entirely level. The voice of a woman who had had time to feel all the feelings and had arrived at this breakfast having moved past them into something cooler and more purposeful. "I also know that Vincent has managed the situation. I want you to understand that I am aware of all of it." "How long have you known?" Claire said. "About Alexander's involvement?" 6 weeks. She watched Claire's face. "About Vincent's decision to speak with you? 4 days. And you didn't—" "I chose not to interfere." She picked up her coffee, set it down. "I want to ask you something directly, and I would like a direct answer." "All right. What do you want?" Margaret looked at her across the white tablecloth, not unkindly. With the focused attention of a woman who had learned to ask the important question first and build everything else around the answer. Not what you think you should want, not what makes sense on paper. What do you actually want? Claire opened her mouth. "Take your time," Margaret said. She took her time. She looked at the tablecloth. She thought about the 2-bedroom apartment on the north side and the notepad on the refrigerator and the Venice Canal print that had moved with her through 3 apartments. She thought about the life Alex had described, the dog, the Sunday mornings, the house somewhere quieter. She thought about sitting in the kitchen across from him while he told her about Pharaoh, with the exhausted confession of a man who had been holding something heavy for too long. She thought about 11 seconds in a dining room doorway. Why the blue? The 2 words that had cost a man something, even if the something was small. "I don't know," she said. Margaret nodded, as though this was a more useful answer than certainty would have been. "Then I'll tell you what I observe," she said. "You are a woman who has spent the last 2 years trying very hard to fit into a shape that was designed before you arrived. And you have been gracious about it, capable. I won't pretend I didn't assess you when Alexander brought you home." She paused. "I assessed you as someone who was working very hard and was slightly terrified and wasn't going to let the terror show. I found that admirable." "But," Claire said, "but admirable isn't the same as right." She looked at Claire steadily. "The life Alexander wants, the quiet life, away from all of this. He may one day be able to have it, but he is not there yet, and he may not get there in the time frame he's imagining. And you have been preparing to build your life around a future that depends on a set of circumstances that are not yet real." It was the most honest thing anyone in the Callahan family had said to her directly. She felt the weight of it settle. "Are you telling me to end the engagement?" Claire said. "I'm telling you what I see." Margaret looked at her plate, then back up. "I'm also telling you that whatever you decide, it should be based on what is true, not on what you hope will become true. That's a distinction I learned too late in my own life to be useful to myself." The waiter came. They ordered. The moment shifted into something less exposed, and they talked about smaller things, and Claire watched Margaret Callahan eat her eggs with the composed precision of a woman who kept her architecture intact regardless of what was happening underneath it. And she thought, this is what 2 decades inside this family looks like. This is the cost of the beautiful rooms and the white peonies and the careful, armored face. She did not want that face. She had not realized it as clearly as she realized it now. She called Alex that afternoon. He answered on the second ring, which told her he had been waiting for it, or had been dreading it, which amounted to the same thing in terms of behavior. "Can we meet?" she said. "Yes." No hesitation. "Tonight?" "Tonight." He suggested the apartment. She suggested neutral ground, a coffee shop near his building, the one they'd gone to on their third date, which had seemed significant and now felt like the wrong kind of significant, the kind that puts pressure on a setting it was never designed to hold. He was there before her. He looked like a man who had not been sleeping particularly well. Not dramatically so, not in a way anyone who didn't know him would notice, but she knew him. The slight shadow under his eyes, the way he held his coffee cup with both hands. She sat down across from him and did not take off her coat. "I talked to your mother," she said. He absorbed this without surprise, which told her Margaret had mentioned it. "Okay." "She told me she's known about Pharaoh for 6 weeks. His jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." "And she didn't say anything to you?" "No." "Why?" He looked at his coffee. "Because in this family, knowing something and using it are two separate decisions. She decided not to use it." He looked up. "She was waiting to see if I'd handle it myself." "Did you?" A pause. "Vincent handled it." "That's not the same thing." No, it's not." He set the cup down. "Claire, I owe you an explanation, not for Pharaoh. You understand Pharaoh. I mean, for not telling you, for 2 months sitting across from you every day and not telling you." "You were scared," she said. "Yes." "Of what specifically?" He looked at her directly. "Of losing you. If you knew how complicated it was, how deep in all of it I actually was, not the version I gave you, not the managed version. I was afraid you'd realize you were standing in something you didn't sign up for. Alex, I knew what your family was before I agreed to marry you. Knowing in the abstract is different from knowing that your fiancé has been cooperating with organized crime investigators without telling you." His voice was even, honest. "Those aren't the same level of knowing." She thought about that. He was not wrong. "I'm not ending this because of Pharaoh," she said. He went very still. "I'm not," she said. "I want to be clear about that. What you did, I understand it, even if I don't think it was the right decision. You were trying to find a door. I understand wanting a door." She pressed her thumb against the inside of her ring. "What I'm less clear about is whether the life on the other side of the door is the same one for both of us." He was quiet. A long quiet. The kind where the shape of the silence changes as it continues. "The kiss," he said finally. "That's not—" "No, I know it was an accident. I know you didn't—" He stopped, restarted. "But you didn't tell me, for 3 weeks. And when I think about why you didn't tell me, I can construct a reason that has nothing to do with guilt, nothing to do with something happening between you and Vincent. I can construct a reason that's purely practical. You were working out what it meant. You didn't want to create a problem from something that wasn't a problem." He paused. "But I also think about you in that hallway, and then 4 days later, meeting my brother alone. And I can't fully separate those two things." She did not look away. "That's fair," she said. "Did you want to?" he said. "See him again." The question was quiet. It landed the way his question in the kitchen had landed. Not aggressively, not as an accusation, but as a man asking for the truth, because he has decided the truth is what he needs, even if it is not what he wants. She thought about the Hendricks Cafe and the way she'd felt walking in. The way she'd worn her coat the whole time, because leaving it on felt like retaining an option. The way she'd cataloged everything he said with a precision she did not usually bring to conversations. The way she'd stood on Damon afterward and could remember the specific sequence of what he'd said, but also the specific intervals between sentences. The pauses that were thinking pauses, not discomfort pauses. The way she had returned to his 2-word observation about a paint color more times in the subsequent days than she could honestly justify. She opened her mouth, and that was when her phone buzzed. She would have ignored it. She was going to ignore it. Except that it buzzed 3 times in rapid succession, which was the pattern she had set for emergency contact from her office. She glanced at the screen. It was Keiko. 3 texts. The first said, "Someone is here. says he's from the city permitting office. He has documents. The second said, Claire, he says the permit for the Gold Coast project has been flagged. He wants to talk about the contract. The third said, he's asking about Callahan development. She looked at the text for 3 seconds. She looked at Alex across the table. His face had changed. He had read something in hers. What? He said. Someone at my office. She turned the phone toward him. He read the texts. She watched him read them. She watched his face do the thing it had done in the kitchen. The machinery running, the output managed, but the management thinner this time, less effective. Permitting, he said, flatly. Callahan Development is the firm that referred me to the Gold Coast project, she said, which he knew, because he was the one who had made the referral 6 months ago as a way of helping her firm access a level of clientele she hadn't previously been able to reach. He had done it as a gift. She had understood it as a gift. She understood now that it had also made her professionally entangled with a family business she had no legal standing to be entangled with, in a way that could be used as leverage by someone who needed leverage. Pharaoh, she said. Alex's mouth had gone flat. They're not from permitting, she said. Are they? No, he said. They're not. She was already standing up, her bag over her shoulder, her coat still on because she had never taken it off. I have to go. Claire, I have to go right now. She looked at him. Call Vincent. She walked out of the coffee shop and she called a car, and she stood on the sidewalk with her phone pressed to her ear and her other hand clenched at her side, and she thought, this is what happens when you try to keep the complicated thing at a careful distance. It does not stay at a distance. It arrives at your office with documents, and it puts your name on the same page as the thing you were trying not to become part of. The car arrived. She got in. She called Keiko. Is he still there? Yes, he's waiting. He said he'd wait. Don't give him anything. Don't sign anything. Don't let him take any documents. If he tries to leave with anything, take a photograph of what he's carrying. She kept her voice even. She was good at even. I'll be there in 8 minutes. She was good at even. I'll be there in 8 minutes. Okay, Claire? He said if you weren't back by 3, he was going to the county clerk. She looked at the time. She had 14 minutes. He's not going anywhere, she said, because she understood suddenly, with cold clarity, that this was not about the permit. This was about leverage. This was someone deciding to test how much pressure could be applied to Claire Whitmore before something gave, before she called Alex, or before Alex called someone, or before the chain of reactions produced something that could be used. She was being used as a pressure point. She thought about Vincent's hands flat on the table at Hendricks. If I stopped now, he could manage the exposure. He said no one else in the family needed to know. But someone else did know. Someone else had known for longer than Alex, longer than Vincent, and had decided to use that knowledge not immediately but patiently, which was so much worse. The patience of someone who understood that the right moment was worth waiting for. The car pulled up outside her building. She got out and went upstairs and walked into the office, and there was a man sitting on her client presentation couch, the olive velvet couch, the one that made people feel like they were in a space where good decisions got made. And he was wearing a county lanyard and holding a manila folder, and he looked up when she came in with the expectant expression of someone who has been waiting and is pleased to have been proven right about their patience. She stood in the center of the room. Ms. Whitmore, he said, I'm glad you could make it. I was just telling your assistant. I know what you were telling her, Claire said, and I know you're not from the permitting office. The man's expression did not change significantly, just a slight recalibration, the dropping of the outermost layer of pretense, like a card player who has been called and sees no point in maintaining the fiction of the hand. Detective Pharaoh, she said. Organized crime unit. He tilted his head. You're well informed for someone who's supposed to be peripheral to all this. What do you want? He set the folder on the cushion beside him, opened it, and turned it so she could see the contents from across the room. Documents, photographs, her name in several places. The Callahan Development letterhead visible on at least 2 pages. I want to have a conversation, he said, about Alexander Callahan and the professional relationship between your firm and his family's development company, and about what you may or may not have witnessed in the course of that relationship that could be useful to an ongoing investigation. She looked at the documents. She looked at her name. If I don't talk to you, she said, then these documents suggest a professional entanglement that could be difficult for your firm's licensing, depending on how things proceed. He said it pleasantly, without inflection, the pleasantness of someone who delivers unpleasant things often enough that they have smoothed the delivery into something almost conversational. She thought, he had been waiting. He had waited for Alex to stop cooperating, and then he had gone looking for a different door, and he had found one that had her name on it. She thought, Vincent said the exposure was contained. She thought, he was wrong. She thought Alex, sitting in a coffee shop 4 blocks away, had no idea that the situation he had handed his brother to manage had just walked through her door, wearing a county lanyard and smiling pleasantly and holding documents with her name on them. She thought, I have 14 days until the Gold Coast project contract renews. She thought, I have 2 junior designers who depend on this office for their livelihoods. She thought, I walked out of Alex's apartment 2 nights ago, having told him the truth for the first time in 3 weeks, and I was proud of that. And now here is where the truth has gotten me. She looked at Detective Farrow sitting on her olive velvet couch, and she understood, with the cold, clarifying understanding of a person who has just seen the full dimensions of the thing they are standing inside, that there was no version of the next 5 minutes that did not cost her something. The question was what she was willing to lose and what she was not, and whether she knew the difference clearly enough to choose correctly under pressure in a room with a man who had been trained to use pressure as a tool and had been using it since before she sat down. She took off her coat, she pulled out the chair across from him, and she sat down. She sat down and she put her hands flat on the table between them, and she looked at Detective Farrow and she said, I want to see your badge. He reached into his jacket and produced it. She looked at it long enough to read the name and the unit number and the badge number. She memorized all 3. Okay, she said, Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to tell you exactly what I know, she said, and what I don't know. And then you're going to tell me what you actually want, not the permit version, the real version. And we're going to have a conversation that doesn't waste either of our time. Farrow leaned back slightly. The recalibration again, this time more significant. He had come in expecting someone who would be frightened by the documents, who would call Alex, who would react in a way that produced useful information or useful pressure. He had not expected someone who asked to see the badge and then sat down. All right, he said, that works for me. The documents, she said. The Callahan development referral. Walk me through what you think you have. He opened the folder. Callahan Development referred your firm for the Gold Coast contract 6 months ago. The contract value is significant, north of $400,000 for the design phase alone. The referral came directly from Alexander Callahan, who at the time was actively engaged in preliminary conversations with my office. So the referral looks like a gift designed to create professional dependency, she said. It looks like an inducement that could constitute— It wasn't, she said. Alex referred me because we were engaged and because my firm was qualified and because he wanted to help. That's the complete story. Can you prove the motivation? Can you prove otherwise? He looked at her. He was reassessing. She could see it, the slight shift in how he was holding himself, the way his hand had moved fractionally away from the folder. What I can prove, he said, is a pattern of professional entanglement between your business and a development company with documented ties to organized crime activity. That pattern becomes interesting to a jury, regardless of what the motivation was. A jury, she said. You're a long way from a jury. We're closer than you might think. She looked at the documents. She thought about Keiko in the next room, probably sitting very still at her desk, probably pretending to work. She thought about the Gold Coast townhouse site plan pinned to her wall. She thought about 12 years of building something from a dining table and a laptop. What do you want from me specifically? She said. Not the case. Me. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, I want to know about Vincent Callahan. She kept her face still. Not Alexander. We've had Alexander. Alexander gave us operational details about the development company, about the accounting structures, about some of the relationships between the legitimate business and the other business. He paused. What Alexander doesn't have access to is the decision-making layer, the people above the development company, the people who make the calls that don't appear in any document anywhere. Vincent, she said, Vincent Callahan has been the operational head of the Callahan organization for 11 years. We have circumstantial. We have financial trail that disappears into structures we can't fully penetrate. What we don't have is someone with direct access to his decision-making process who is willing to speak to us. She sat with the shape of what he was asking. "You think I have that access," she said. "I think you've been in rooms with him. I think you've had conversations that weren't about the weather." He looked at her steadily. "I think a woman who is engaged to his brother and working on projects referred by his family's company has a proximity that takes other people years to build." "I'm not a source," she said. "You're not. Yet." "I won't be." He picked up the folder and closed it and set it on his knee. "Ms. Whitmore, I want to be straightforward with you because I think you respond better to straightforward. The permit documentation is not the primary pressure here. The primary pressure is this: we are going to build this case with or without your cooperation. The question is whether you are inside the line or outside it when we do." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She did not take it out. "Outside the line meaning," she said, "meaning a person who had access to information relevant to an ongoing federal investigation and chose not to provide it. That's a position with a specific legal texture that becomes relevant depending on how things unfold." He was not threatening her. He was explaining. That was somehow worse, the clinical clarity of someone laying out a landscape rather than making demands. "Inside the line means we have a conversation. You tell me what you know. We work with what you give us, and your name stays where it belongs, outside the case." Her phone buzzed again. She took it out this time. She looked at the screen. "Alex." 2 texts. The first, "Vincent knows, get out of there." The second, "Claire, now." She put the phone face down on the table. "I need 10 minutes, she said. Farrow looked at the phone on the table. He had seen the screen well enough to register that she had read something and chosen to put it down. "I'm not going anywhere." She stood up. "I'll be right outside." She went out through the back room into the narrow hallway that connected to the emergency stairwell, which was the only place in the building with reliable acoustic privacy. She called Alex. He answered before it rang twice. "Are you still in the building?" he said. "Yes." "Leave. Go out the back. Do not give him anything. Do not sign anything." "I know. I haven't." She pressed her back against the wall. The stairwell was cold, the concrete drawing heat through her jacket. "Alex, he wants Vincent." A silence. "He doesn't have anything on Vincent," Alex said. His voice was different now, stripped down, the easy surface gone, something harder and more familiar with this specific kind of crisis underneath. "He's building. He's been building for 2 years, and he's not there yet. Whatever he showed you. He has our professional connection, the referral. That's not enough. He thinks proximity to Vincent is enough. He thinks I can give him access." Another silence. Longer. "Can you?" Alex said. The question arrived without accusation. Just the honest version of what he needed to know, stated directly, because they were past the version where they managed what they said to each other. "I've had 2 conversations with him," she said. "One at a cafe, one at my office. They weren't operational conversations. I don't know anything useful to Farrow's case." "But Farrow doesn't know that." "No." She heard Alex exhale. Slow and controlled, the exhale of a man thinking through a geometry he has practiced before, even if not in these specific coordinates. "Claire, I need you to leave that building right now. Do not go back in there. Keiko can handle it. Keiko is 24 years old, and this is not, I'm sending someone. You're..." She stopped. "Alex, don't send someone from your family to my office because a detective is sitting on my couch. He's not just a detective, I know what he is." She pressed her hand flat against the concrete wall. The cold moved through her palm. "I'm going back in there. I'm going to tell him I don't have anything useful, and that if he wants to continue this conversation, he needs to contact my attorney, and then I'm going to walk out. Claire, I built this office myself. I'm not walking out the back stairs because a man in a county lanyard made me nervous." A pause. Then, "Okay." Flat, resigned to it. "Okay. But the second you're out, you call me." "Yes. And don't say his name. Don't say Vincent's name in there." "I wasn't going to." She ended the call. She stood in the cold stairwell for 5 seconds. She thought about 12 years and a dining table and a laptop and the specific satisfaction of building something that belonged entirely to herself. She went back into the office. Farrow was still on the couch. He had not moved the folder. He looked up when she came in with the patient expression of a man who had assessed the situation and decided he could afford to wait. "My attorney's name is Sandra Okafor," Claire said, standing in the center of the room. She can be reached at her firm during business hours. If you have questions about my professional relationship with Callahan Development or anything related to your investigation, you're welcome to contact her. I don't have anything useful to offer you beyond what I've said, and I'm not in a position to have further conversations without legal representation present. Farrow looked at her for a moment. That's a very clean exit, he said. I've had 10 minutes to construct it. He stood up. He picked up the folder. He buttoned his jacket with the unhurried efficiency of a man who is not worried about what has just happened because what has just happened is not the end of anything. Ms. Whitmore, he said at the door, I want you to think about something. She waited. Vincent Callahan is not a man who maintains relationships without strategic purpose. Whatever access you think you have to him, whatever version of him you've seen, it's been shown to you deliberately. He looked at her with something that was not quite pity and not quite warning. People in his position don't have accidents. They don't have unplanned conversations. They don't reach out to a brother's fiancé without a reason. He left. She stood in the center of her office and listened to his footsteps on the stairs, and then the door at the bottom, and then nothing. Keiko appeared in this doorway. Is it okay? Yes, Claire said. Go home early today. I'll lock up. She waited until she heard Keiko's footsteps, and then the door again. Then she sat down on the olive velvet couch, where Farrow had been sitting, and she put her face in her hands, and she stayed like that for about 2 minutes, not crying, not quite, just breathing in a way that required conscious management. Then she took her hands away from her face, and she thought about what Farrow had said. People in his position don't have accidents. She thought about a phone call out of nowhere from an unknown number. There's a cafe on Damon. Hendricks. I'll be at the back table. She thought about a man appearing at her office the day after she spent her first night not sleeping in Alex's apartment. She thought about 2 words about a paint color, offered at a dinner table, small enough to be accidental and specific enough to be deliberate. She sat with all of it. Then she called Vincent. He answered on the first ring, which meant he had been holding his phone. Are you safe? He said. Yes. He's gone. She looked at the wall where the Gold Coast site plan was still pinned. I need to talk to you. I know. Not on the phone. No. A pause. I'll come to you. I'll come to you, she said. Where are you? He gave her an address she didn't recognize. She wrote it on the back of a fabric sample envelope because there was nothing else on the table. She took a car. The address was a building in River North. Older, unremarkable from the outside, the kind of architecture that predated the neighborhood's reinvention and had survived it by being too structurally solid to justify demolishing. She buzzed the number he had given her and a door opened and she went up 2 flights, and he was standing in the hallway when she reached the landing. He looked, not different exactly, but the composure that he usually wore was running on less infrastructure than usual. There were signs, if you knew to look for them. The jacket was off, his sleeves were rolled to the elbows, and he was holding his phone in a way that suggested he had been working for hours before she called. Come in, he said. The apartment was spare, not minimalist in a design sense, just sparse in the way of a space that served a function but was not anyone's primary home. A table, a laptop, 3 phones, 2 of which were not smartphones. A coffee maker that looked like it had been running since morning. She stood in the middle of the room and she said, Did you know Farrow was going to come to my office? He looked at her. No. But you knew the containment had failed. I knew this morning it was more complicated than I'd managed. He set his phone on the table. I was trying to locate the breach when Alex called. Farrow told me something, she said. He told me that you don't have accidents, that you don't have unplanned conversations, that reaching out to me was strategic. Vincent did not answer immediately. Is that true? She said. He looked at her with those careful, dark eyes, and the quality of his looking was different now. The full-weight version, not the managed version, the one he used when he had decided that management was no longer the relevant mode. Partly, he said. She had expected denial, or the reframing that intelligent people use to make deliberate things sound instinctive. She had not expected partly. Tell me which part, she said. He pulled out a chair at the table and turned it toward her and gestured at it, not sitting himself. She sat. He stayed standing, which she understood was not a power move. It was a man who was thinking better on his feet. I knew when I called you that giving you that information would create instability in your relationship with Alex, he said. I knew that was a possible outcome. I told myself the primary reason was your safety and your right to know. Both of those things were true. He looked at the window. They weren't the only things that were true. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, traffic moved through River North at the specific rhythm of late afternoon. Not rushed, not slow. The ordinary tempo of a city conducting itself. You wanted me to see him clearly, she said. I wanted you to have accurate information. Vincent. He looked at her. You wanted me to see him clearly, she said again. Not an accusation, just the truth, offered directly, because that was the only language that worked in this room. He was quiet for a moment. Then, yes. She pressed her thumb against the inside of her engagement ring, the ridge of the setting, the anchor she had been using for weeks as a reset, a reminder of what was real. Why? She said. He looked at her for a long time, the kind of look that has weight to it, not comfortable weight, not the weight of something pleasant being considered, the weight of a man who has spent years being precise about everything and is trying to be precise about this. Because you were the first person in a very long time who saw something in me that I hadn't calculated, he said. That night in the hallway. You didn't know who I was. You weren't performing anything. You weren't afraid of me. You weren't trying to get something from me. He paused. You were just present, in a way that I wasn't expecting. I kissed you because I thought you were someone else. I know. His voice was very even. That's what I mean. It was an accident. Nothing about it was strategic, and I don't have many accidents. She thought about Pharaoh. People in his position don't have accidents. She thought about standing in a hallway with music playing in another room, and the specific quality of a stillness that had nothing performed in it. I didn't regret it, she said. Quiet. Factual. Before I opened my eyes, I didn't regret it. He did not move. He did not look away. I know, he said. How? Because you told me with the way you stepped back. He said it simply. You didn't step back angry. You stepped back correcting. There's a difference. She looked at her hands, the ring on her left hand, the fabric sample envelope on the table with an address written on the back of it in her own handwriting. She thought about what Pharaoh had said, the whole shape of it, not just the accusation. The suggestion that everything was strategic, everything calculated, that the version of Vincent she'd been given access to was a curated version designed to produce a specific result. She thought that could be true. She thought it could also be what a man who has spent 30 years being looked at as a threat would say to a woman who had stopped looking at him that way. You defend the interpretation you understand. You trust the danger. Pharaoh wants you, she said. Yes. He's going to come back. Yes. Through me, if he can. He'll try. Vincent moved to the table and sat down across from her. That's why I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I am telling you this because it directly affects your safety, and for no other reason. She waited. The breach in the containment, he said. It wasn't an oversight. Someone gave Pharaoh the connection between your firm and Callahan Development deliberately. It wasn't Pharaoh finding it. It was someone handing it to him. Who? Someone inside the family. His jaw was tight, just slightly. Someone who knew I had spoken with you. Someone who decided that creating pressure on you was a way to create pressure on me. She felt something cold move through her. They used me as leverage against you. Yes. Who? He looked at her. My father's brother, Thomas Callahan. He's been opposed to my position in the organization for 4 years. He's been waiting for a reason to demonstrate that my judgment is compromised. A pause. My meeting with you gave him that reason. She thought about the Callahan dinner tables she had sat at, the uncle whose name she kept forgetting, the one who asked about the Delacroix situation in a voice that assumed the answer would be short. Thomas, she said. Yes. He gave Pharaoh my firm. He gave Pharaoh the referral documentation, the professional connection, framed it in a way that suggested you were a knowing participant rather than an incidental one. His voice was controlled, tight with something underneath the control. He was trying to force a choice. If Pharaoh pressures you and you cooperate, I'm exposed. If Pharaoh pressures you and you don't cooperate, it demonstrates to the rest of the family that I've created a liability by making contact with you. She looked at him across the table. Either way, you lose. Either way, Thomas wins the argument he's been making for 4 years. She breathed, in and out. The cold in her chest was settling into something more specific. Not fear exactly, but the crystallized version of understanding how a situation actually worked. What do we do? She said. He looked at her. The we had registered. She could see it. I'm handling Thomas, he said. Tonight. How? Internally. His eyes were flat. You don't need the details. Okay. She pressed her palms to the table. And Pharaoh. Pharaoh needs to understand that you have nothing useful to him, which is true. You don't. He paused. The problem is that he won't believe that without a reason. What kind of reason? The kind that makes clear that pursuing you as a vector is a dead end worth more trouble than it produces. He looked at her. That requires someone making that clear to him directly, in terms he understands. You. Not me directly. Someone who can communicate on that level without escalating. He was quiet for a moment. Alex? She blinked. Alex has something Pharaoh still wants, Vincent said. He stopped cooperating, but the channel is still open. If Alex makes contact, offers something limited and verifiable, enough to reestablish value, Pharaoh redirects his attention to that channel and away from you. You're asking Alex to go back to Pharaoh. I'm asking Alex to make one controlled contact that I manage from this side, that gives Pharaoh just enough to refocus and then closes permanently. He looked at her directly. It's the cleanest solution. Does Alex know about this plan? Not yet. Are you going to ask him? I'm going to tell him. A pause. After I talk to Thomas. She looked at him. And if Alex says no, then I find another way. He said it simply, without self-pity, without threat. Just the flat acknowledgement that there were things he could control and things he couldn't, and he was clear about which was which. I'm not going to force Alex to do something he's decided not to do. That's not how most people would handle it, she said. No, he agreed. She looked at the table, the phones, the coffee maker that had been running too long. What do you need from me right now? Nothing, he said. I need you to go somewhere safe and stay there until I've handled Thomas. Don't go back to your office tonight. Don't go to Alex's. Where do I go? Do you have a friend outside all of this? Someone with no connection to the family? She thought about it. Yes. My friend Dara. She lives in Pilsen. Go there. He slid one of the non-smartphones across the table. This is a clean line. No connection to anything. If you need to reach me, the number is already in it. One contact. That's the only number. She looked at the phone on the table. It was older. Basic screen. The kind that had been new 8 years ago. She picked it up. Vincent, she said. He looked at her. After tonight, she said. After Thomas and Pharaoh and whatever happens with Alex. She held the phone in both hands. What happens to you? He looked at her for a long moment. The full weight look, the unmanaged version. That depends on several things, he said. On whether Alex cooperates. On several things, he said again. Not evasive, just accurate. Refusing to simplify something that wasn't simple. She nodded. She stood up. She put the clean phone in her coat pocket. She picked up her bag. Be careful, she said. He nodded once. She went to the door and opened it, and she was in the hallway with the door still open when she heard him say her name. She stopped. The Pharaoh thing, he said. What he told you. About accidents. She turned to look at him. He was still at the table, his hands flat on the surface, looking at her directly. He was right that I don't have many accidents. He was wrong about what that one meant. She held his gaze. Okay, she said. She went down the stairs. Dara Ose had been Claire's closest friend since they'd worked at the same architecture firm 12 years ago, before Claire went out on her own and Dara moved to Pilsen and started making ceramics that sold for prices that still surprised both of them. She was 41, practical, occasionally profane, and the only person in Claire's life who had reacted to the news of the Callahan engagement with the mafia ones. You're sure about that? Claire had told her she was overthinking it. Dara answered the door in paint-covered overalls and looked at Claire's face and said, Okay, come in. I'll make food. She did not ask questions until Claire was sitting at her kitchen table with a bowl of something that had vegetables and rice and took 25 minutes to make, which was the specific combination of factors that meant Dara was worried enough to cook properly. "How bad?" Dara said, sitting across from her. "Complicated," Claire said, "involving a detective, the engagement, and 2 brothers." "In what order?" "All at once." Dara looked at her. "The other brother," she said. Not a question. The tone of a woman who has been quietly noting something for some time and is now having it confirmed. "I didn't. I know you didn't. I've watched you try very hard not to for 2 months." She picked up her fork. "Eat something, then tell me." Claire ate something, then she told her. Not all of it. Not the operational details, not Thomas Callahan's name, not Pharaoh's investigation, but the shape of it. The hallway. The cafe. The coffee shop with Alex 2 days ago. The detective on the couch. Dara listened without interrupting, which was not her default mode, and told Claire something about the quality of the listening. When Claire finished, Dara said, "The ring." Claire looked down at her left hand. "When's the last time you forgot you were wearing it?" Dara said. The question was specific, surgical, the kind that Dara produced about twice a year when she decided the situation required something sharper than sympathy. Claire thought about it. Genuinely tried to recall the last time she had moved through a day without the awareness of the ring on her finger as a kind of presence. Not unpleasant, but constant, active, a thing that required maintenance. She couldn't. "A while," she said. "Rings aren't supposed to feel like something you're maintaining," Dara said. Claire looked at her bowl. "He's a good man." "I know." "He made mistakes, but they came from—" "Claire," Dara's voice was gentle but direct. "I know he's a good man. That's not the question." The kitchen was quiet. Outside, something, a cat or a raccoon, moved through the alley with a brief scattering sound. "What's the question?" Claire said. Dara looked at her steadily. "What does it cost you to stay? Not what do you want? Not who do you love?" The specific, financial, practical question of a woman who had grown up watching her mother run a household budget and knew that love and cost were not mutually exclusive categories. Claire pressed her thumb against the inside of the ring. The ridge of the setting. She thought, "I have been using this as an anchor for weeks. The reset. The reminder of what is real." She thought, "The thing you need to keep reminding yourself is real is usually the thing that isn't real enough." Her phone, her regular phone, buzzed. Alex. She answered it. "Are you safe?" he said. "Yes. I'm at Dara's." "Good." She heard something in his background. Voices. Low. The acoustic texture of a large interior space. "Vincent called me." "I know. He told me he was going to. He told me what he needs." A pause. "Claire, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me the way you've been honest with me for the last 2 days. Even though the last 2 days have been—" He stopped. Restarted. "Even though it's been hard." "Ask," she said. "Vincent, what happened at the River North apartment?" "He told me about Thomas, about what Thomas did with Pharaoh." She kept her voice even. "He gave me a clean phone and told me to come here." "That's all?" She looked at Dara across the table. Dara was looking at the wall, giving her the privacy of not watching. "He told me that meeting me wasn't an accident," she said. "That contacting me wasn't purely practical." A silence. "And what did you say?" Alex said. "I said I didn't regret it." The hallway. She closed her eyes. "I told him I didn't regret it before I knew who he was." The silence on the other end was the longest one yet. She could hear him breathing, steady, slow. The breathing of a man who is doing the same thing she had done in the cold stairwell of her office, managing output while the interior machinery ran at full capacity. "Alex," she said. "I need to go handle this," he said. "The Vincent situation. Pharaoh." His voice was controlled, almost steady. "We'll talk after, okay?" "Okay. Don't go anywhere tonight." "I won't." He ended the call. She put the phone down on Dara's kitchen table and she sat with the silence for a moment, and then she said, without looking up, "He's going to do it. What Vincent asked." "Help with the detective thing?" Dara said. "Yes." "Because he loves you?" "Because—" She stopped. She thought about it honestly. Because he loves me, and because his brother asked him, and because he's a man who, when he's out of better options, grabs the one available. And right now, this is the one available. She looked up. And maybe because he already knows. Dara looked at her. About me, Claire said, and what I'm working out. Dara picked up her fork, set it down. And what are you working out? The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocked once. Whether the life I was building, Claire said slowly, was the one I was building toward or the one I was building to stop being afraid. She looked at her hands on the table, the ring on the left, the plain skin of the right. There's a difference. I think I've known there's a difference for longer than I've admitted. And the other man, Dara said, not unkindly, he's not, this isn't about replacing one with another. She shook her head. That's not what this is. This is about me. What I've been performing versus what I actually am. Okay, Dara said, simply, not questioning it, not pushing. The clean phone in Claire's pocket stayed silent. Her regular phone on the table stayed silent. Outside, a car moved through the Pilsen street with its radio on, something with bass that passed and faded. She thought about Thomas Callahan, somewhere in the city right now, believing he had constructed a perfect piece of leverage. She thought about Pharaoh, wherever detectives went after hours, probably doing something completely ordinary, grocery shopping, watching television, while a plan he'd built over months was about to be redirected by a phone call from a man he thought he'd lost. She thought about Vincent in River North with his sleeves rolled and 3 phones and a coffee maker that had been on too long, handling Thomas Callahan in terms she hadn't asked for the details of and didn't need. She thought about Alex making the call he didn't want to make to the detective he'd walked away from because it was the one available option and it would protect her and his brother in the same motion, and that was the kind of man he was. The man who found the door that served the most people even when it cost him. She thought, I love him. She thought, that has not stopped being true. She thought love and right are not the same category. Her mother had known that. Margaret Callahan knew it. Dara had known it for years and had the patience to let her figure it out herself. Her phone buzzed. Not the clean phone. Her regular phone. A text from an unknown number. Different from the one Vincent had used to call her. A number she had never seen before. It said, This isn't over, Ms. Whitmore. When Callahan falls, everyone near him falls with him. Think about what you're protecting. She looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. Thomas, she thought. Or someone working for Thomas, making sure she understood the geometry of the position she was in. She picked up the clean phone. She sent one text to the single number in it. Someone just contacted me on my regular phone. Unknown number. Said when Callahan falls, everyone near him falls. The response came in 40 seconds. Screenshot it. Don't respond. Stay where you are. And then 15 seconds later, a second message on the clean phone. Not instructions. Not operational. 4 words. I won't let that happen. She stared at the screen. She thought about a man who spent 11 years controlling an empire that ran on fear and precision and the calculated management of every variable, sending 4 words through a clean line on a burner phone that meant nothing strategically and cost him the pretense that everything he did was strategic. She set the phone face down on Dara's kitchen table. Eat, Dara said. She picked up her fork. The city moved outside the window. The night was deepening. Somewhere to the north, in an apartment in River North and a building somewhere south of the Loop, 2 brothers were doing something she would not be able to watch and would not fully understand later when they told her the broad strokes of it, but that would determine by morning whether the structure she was standing inside collapsed or held. She ate. She breathed. She kept her hands steady, and she thought, whatever she decided about Alex, about the ring, about the shape of her life going forward, she was going to decide it on her own terms, without Pharaoh's leverage, and without Thomas Callahan's threats, and without the performance of someone building the life they were supposed to want. She was going to decide it as herself. She had not been fully herself, she understood now, for longer than 2 years. The clean phone stayed face down on the table. She did not pick it up again. But she thought about those 4 words for the rest of the night, and they did not feel like strategy, and she did not think they were. And she was no longer sure whether that made everything simpler or infinitely more. She did not sleep. She lay on Dara's couch under a blanket that smelled like clay dust and detergent, and she watched the ceiling lighten by degrees as the Chicago night gave way to something gray and undecided, and she held the clean phone on her chest and waited. At 4:47 in the morning, it buzzed once. Thomas is handled. Pharaoh has been redirected. You can go home. That was all. She lay there for another 20 minutes with the phone on her chest, feeling her own heartbeat against it, and she thought about what handled meant in the language of a man like Vincent Callahan, and she decided she was not going to think about it further because she would not be given details, and asking for them would be the kind of request that changed what she was to the people in this story, and she was not ready to be changed in that direction. At 5:15, she got up. She folded the blanket. She wrote Dara a note on the back of an envelope. Thank you. I'll call you later. I'm okay. And she let herself out of the apartment quietly and walked down the Pilsen street in the early gray light with her bag over her shoulder and her coat fully buttoned this time, every button in the right hole. She called a car. She went to the Wicker Park office. She made coffee on the pour-over setup, and she stood at the window and watched the street come alive in increments. The first delivery trucks, the first joggers, the first person who had somewhere to be before anyone else did. And she drank the coffee, and she let the night drain out of her slowly, the way cold drains out of a room when you've finally turned the heat on. Not quickly, not all at once. At 7, she called her attorney. Sandra Okafor answered with the voice of a woman who had been awake for a while, which was one of the many reasons Claire had chosen her. Tell me, Sandra said. She told her. Everything except names and operational details. Just the shape of it. The documents, the permit pretense, the actual request, the response she'd given. When she finished, Sandra was quiet for 4 seconds. You did the right thing, Sandra said. Exactly right. Is there exposure? For a referral from a development company to a design firm? On paper, no. In terms of what can be implied, there's always room to imply things, but implying isn't prosecuting, and Pharaoh knows that. A pause. Is this the end of his interest in you or an interruption? I think an interruption, she said. Something changed on his end last night. He's being redirected. By whom? I don't know, she said, which was technically true in terms of mechanism. Okay. If he contacts you again, you call me first. Don't open the door, don't take the call, don't read the documents. I know. You do know, Sandra agreed with a warmth that was partly professional and partly the warmth of someone who had watched Claire handle difficult situations for 4 years and had stopped worrying about her capacity to handle them. How are you otherwise? Working on it, Claire said. That's the right answer. Sandra ended the call. Alex called at 9. She was on her second coffee and had the Gold Coast site plan in front of her and had been staring at it for 30 minutes without making any progress because her brain kept redirecting itself to other things, which was not behavior she usually allowed during working hours, but which she was granting herself today as a specific exception. Can you come to the apartment? He said. His voice was the voice from last night, stripped down, the surface gone, the harder thing underneath. Yes. Now, if you can. She went. He opened the door before she knocked, which meant he had heard the elevator and had been close enough to the door to hear it, which meant he had been waiting. He was in the same clothes as yesterday. He had not slept either. She could see it in the quality of his stillness, the specific fatigue of a body that has been running on adrenaline past the point where adrenaline was still doing anything useful. He stepped back to let her in. She came in. The apartment looked the same. Of course it looked the same. Nothing that had happened in the last 24 hours was the kind of thing that rearranged furniture. But the sameness felt slightly off, the way a familiar place feels when you're returning to it from somewhere significant and have to recalibrate the distance between who you were when you left and who you are now. She stood in the living room. He stood near the kitchen. The island between them, the same island where they'd sat 2 nights ago with the full weight of everything between them. Thomas, she said, what happened? Vincent handled it. He looked at her steadily. The specifics are, Thomas is no longer in a position to cause problems, within the family or outside it. That's all you need. Pharaoh? I called him last night. He crossed his arms, not defensively, the posture of a man who is cold or whose body is doing something he needs to contain. One conversation. Vincent controlled what I gave him, enough to be credible, nothing that did any actual damage. Pharaoh is redirecting his focus back to the development company's accounting structures. He paused. It will keep him busy long enough for Vincent to close what needs to be closed on the operational side. You were careful. Vincent was careful. I did what he told me to do. He said it without bitterness, just accurately. I'm not good at that part of it. He is. She nodded. He unfolded his arms. He moved from the kitchen side of the island to the living room side, not coming toward her but reducing the geography between them, which she understood as deliberate. I need to say something, he said, and I need you to let me say it all the way through before you respond. Okay? He looked at her. His eyes were tired and clear at the same time, the clarity of someone who has been awake long enough that the things they've been managing around have become too heavy to carry and have been set down. I knew, he said. Not about the hallway specifically, but I knew something had shifted, for weeks. The way you held the ring, the way you were slightly off in the conversations. Not badly, not obviously, just slightly behind where you usually were. He paused. I told myself it was the engagement pressure, the family pressure, the aunts and the estate, and the whole machinery of it. He paused again. I knew it wasn't only that. She held his gaze. She did not speak. I should have asked you directly, he said. Weeks ago. I chose not to because I was afraid of the answer, and it was a failure, not of love, of courage. He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. I'm not telling you this to make you feel responsible for my failure. I'm telling you because you've been trying very hard to be honest with me since the night you told me, and you deserve the same. The apartment was very quiet. Outside the Lincoln Park window, the morning had committed to being fully day. Bright, blunt, the kind of October light that had no patience for ambiguity. Alex, she said, let me finish. Not sharp. Just the request of a man who has organized himself to say something and needs to get through it. Vincent asked to meet with you. He told you things about me. He did it in a way that served a purpose I am still. I'm still deciding how angry to be about, but I think he stopped, pressed his lips together, restarted. I think he did it because he saw something in you, and he is not a man who acts on what he sees. He doesn't let himself. He's spent 30 years not letting himself. He looked at her directly, and he let himself. With you. She felt the weight of it, the full, actual weight. And I think, Alex said, that I knew the moment he called you. Not consciously, but somewhere I knew. And instead of getting angry at him, I got angry at myself. Because I looked at the way he handled things, the way he handled you, even with the manipulation of it. And I thought, that's what I should have done. Given you the truth before it became a crisis. Trusted you with the complexity instead of protecting you from it. His voice was steady, but the steadiness was effortful, and she could hear the effort, and she loved him for not hiding it. I failed that. And Vincent, for all the wrong reasons, or the complicated ones, didn't. She sat down on the couch. Not because she needed to, because the conversation had reached the kind of weight that was better handled without the additional work of standing. I love you, she said. I want to say that first. That hasn't changed. I know, he said. And I have not. Nothing has happened between. I know that too. He sat down across from her, the armchair he always took, the one on his side of the coffee table. That's not the question, Claire. What's the question? He looked at her with those tired, clear eyes. Are you happy? She opened her mouth. Not right now, he said. I know right now is a specific kind of not happy. I mean, were you happy? Before all of this, were you building something that was making you happy, or were you building something that looked like it should? She thought about the ring she kept resetting against, the life he had described, the dog, the Sunday mornings, the quiet, and the way she had said I want that too while thinking about whether the circumstances would ever allow it, the way she had made herself smaller, by degrees, to fit into the shape of the Callahan expectation. Not dramatically, not visibly, just incrementally. The way the water level drops in a container that has a slow leak, so gradual you don't notice until you suddenly see how far it's gone. I was trying to be, she said, honest, fully. He nodded. One slow nod. That's what I thought, he said. The clock in the kitchen ticked. She had never noticed it before. or she had, and stopped hearing it, the way you stop hearing things that are always present. I don't want to lose you, he said. His voice shifted on the sentence, the control thinning just for that sentence, just enough to let through what was underneath. I want to say that clearly. I am not making this easy for you. I'm not going to pretend that what I think is happening doesn't. He stopped. It's going to take me a long time. I know. But I also. He looked at his hands, then back at her. I am tired of the performance of it. The estate and the family, and the version of Alex Callahan I've been building for 20 years that's slightly larger and cleaner than the actual one. I'm tired of it, and I think you've been tired of your version too. And I think that's the truest thing I can say about why we've arrived here. She looked at him across the coffee table. This man she had chosen 2 years ago in a coffee shop downtown, who had made her feel like the world was navigable, who had reached for her hand in the dark for 2 years without failing once, who had run toward a door he thought might lead somewhere better and had not ultimately been able to go through it alone. What do you want? She said. His mother's question, the important one. He thought about it, actually thought about it, not the quick version, the real one. I want to do what I told you I wanted to do, he said. The quiet life, the house somewhere. I want to actually do it, not describe it. He looked at her. I think to do that, I need to build it from something real, not from what we've been building from. She understood him, completely. That means us, she said. Yeah, he said. It means us. She looked down at her left hand. The ring, the ridge of the setting that she had pressed her thumb against 100 times in 6 weeks as a reminder of what was real. She took it off. It came off easily. Her fingers were cold, which helped, or maybe the ease was its own kind of information. She held it in her palm for a moment. It was beautiful. He had chosen it with care and had chosen correctly. She had looked at it the day he put it on her finger and thought, he knows what I would have chosen. She set it on the coffee table between them. He looked at it. He did not pick it up. I'm sorry, she said, that it took me this long to be honest. Stop apologizing for being honest, he said, not harshly, with something like exhausted affection. You could have never been honest. You were honest. That counts. She looked at him across the table. You're going to be okay, she said. You know that. Not right now, I don't. He almost smiled, the way he sometimes almost smiled before the full one arrived. The preliminary version, the one that was more accurate because it hadn't been polished yet. Ask me again in 6 months. She nodded. She stood up. He stood too. They looked at each other across the coffee table with the ring between them, and she thought about all the ordinary mornings, the coffee, the reaching for her hand, the unremarkable kindness of being with someone who meant it. And she felt the loss of it as a specific thing, physical in the way that real losses were physical. Not dramatic, not the movie version, just a thing going out of the room that had been in the room, and the room adjusting imperfectly to its absence. She went to him. She held him. He held her back. They stood like that in the middle of his living room for a long time, neither of them pretending it was anything other than what it was. Goodbye to a version of things that had been real even if it wasn't right, which was its own kind of grief and deserved to be treated as one. He pressed his face into her hair briefly. Then he stepped back. Go, he said. She went. The ring stayed on the table. She did not take it with her. He would deal with it however he dealt with it, and that was his business now. And the line of what was hers and what was his had just been redrawn with the quiet finality of a ring set on a coffee table on a bright October morning. She walked. She did not call a car. She walked through Lincoln Park in the October light with her hands in her coat pockets, and she let the cold work on her face, and she did not try to manage what she was feeling into anything more organized than what it was, which was large and sad, and also, underneath that, something she did not have a clean word for. The specific quality of a weight being lifted that you had been carrying so long you had stopped noticing it was heavy. She walked for 40 minutes. She ended up near the lake. She stood at the railing and looked at the water, which was gray-green and moving the way it always moved in October. Not agitated, not calm, just perpetually adjusting to the thing that was pushing it from underneath. The deep lake cold and the October wind combining into something that had no patience for anything that wasn't genuinely there. She stood there until she was cold enough that standing still was no longer comfortable. Then she went to work. She did not contact Vincent. Not that day, not the next, not for 2 weeks. She worked. She finished the Gold Coast project plans and had a productive meeting with the client, who was pleased with the direction and approved the next phase. She reassigned 2 projects she had been falling behind on and caught up on 3 others. She repainted the back room of the office. Not withe blue, something warmer, a terracotta adjacent to coral that she had been considering for a client and decided to test on herself first. She liked it. It changed the quality of the light in the afternoon. She called her mother on a Sunday and talked for an hour about nothing significant. Her mother's coworkers, a movie she had seen, the price of groceries. And in the middle of it, her mother said without preamble, "You sound different." "Different how?" Claire said. "Like yourself," her mother said. "You've been sounding like someone trying to sound like yourself for a while. This is the regular version." Claire sat with that for a moment. "Yeah," she said. "I think I found my way back." Her mother did not ask what she'd found her way back from. She trusted that Claire would tell her when it was organized enough to tell. That was the specific grace of a woman who had built things alone and understood that the rebuilding phase required more quiet than conversation. She saw Alex once, at a distance, in the 3rd week. He was crossing Michigan Avenue with someone she didn't recognize, a woman about their age, someone from work probably, leaning toward him with the body language of a conversation that required closeness. Claire watched him for about 4 seconds from the other side of the street. He looked, she thought, like a man who was in the process of becoming the actual version of himself. Tired still, but present in a different way. Less managed, less performed. She hoped so. She kept walking. The clean phone had stayed in her coat pocket the whole time. She was aware of it every day, the way you're aware of something you've decided not to use. Its presence felt through its silence, its weight negligible, but specific. A line that went one direction, one number in it. A man who had said, "I won't let that happen," and had not said anything since, because he was, she was beginning to understand, the kind of person who said what he meant, and then waited to see what happened next, and what happened next was not a thing he tried to force. On a Wednesday evening in November, 3 weeks after she had walked out of Alex's apartment, she was closing up the office alone. Keiko had a class, the other junior designer had left at 5, and she was putting on her coat, and she reached into the pocket, and she held the clean phone in her hand, and she looked at it for a long time. She thought about what Pharaoh had said, the strategic version, the man who doesn't have accidents. She thought about 4 words through a burner line at 11:15 at night, the specific syntax of them. Not, "I'll keep you safe," not, "Don't worry," just the plain declarative of a man who had spent his whole life being precise about what he could and couldn't guarantee, and had decided this was something he could guarantee. She thought, he is not a simple thing to want. She thought, I have never particularly wanted simple things. I've wanted things I could manage. Those are not the same. She turned off the office light. She went out into the November evening. She started walking south toward the river, not because she had a destination, but because the river was there, and the city was better at night along the river than in most other places. The lights on the water, the specific sound of wind through the bridge structures, the sense of the city being alive around you without requiring anything from you. She walked for 20 minutes. She stopped on the bridge. She took out the clean phone. She sent one text. "Are you in Chicago?" The response came in 4 minutes. "Yes." She looked at the river. She watched a boat move underneath the bridge, slow and lit, carrying something she couldn't identify. She typed, "The river, Clark Street Bridge, 20 minutes." She put the phone in her pocket. She stood at the railing and waited. What? He came with 13 minutes to spare, which she suspected meant he had been closer than River North, or had been moving as soon as she said, "Are you in Chicago?" which meant something she did not analyze directly. He stopped beside her at the railing, not close enough to touch, present without pressure. He looked at the river. She looked at the river. They stood like that for a moment that had its own complete shape, not silence that needed to be filled, just 2 people arriving at the same place from different distances and taking a moment to locate each other. "How are you?" he said. "Working on it," she said. "That seems to be the honest answer lately." "That's a better answer than most people give." "Alex is okay," she said. "I think. I saw him from a distance. He looked like someone rebuilding." "He's leaving the company," Vincent said. not surprising her exactly. She had understood this was the direction. Moving to Seattle, there's a real estate development firm there that has no connection to the family. He starts in January. He told you. He told me. A pause. We had a conversation, an actual one. He looked at the water. First one in a long time. Since we were both adults, probably. Was it good? He thought about it, which she appreciated. The fact that he didn't reach for the easy answer. It was hard, he said, and then it was better. It's not fixed, but it's not broken the way it was. That's something. Yes, it is. The wind off the river was cold. She pulled her coat tighter. He was in a dark overcoat, no scarf, apparently impervious to November in Chicago, or at least committed to appearing so. Thomas, she said, has relocated, he said, permanently. He's out of the Chicago operation. He's out of any operation. A pause. He made a mistake and he knows it and the family knows it, and that's as much as I'm going to say about it. Is anyone going to come after me again? Through my work? No. Flat. Final. Not a reassurance, a fact. That channel is closed. Pharaoh has enough to work with on the accounting side to keep him occupied for 18 months. By the time he surfaces again, there won't be anything to surface toward. He paused. The operation is restructuring. It's been needing to for a long time. This accelerated the timeline. She looked at the water. And you? He was quiet for a moment. Complicated, he said. Always? Probably always. He looked at the river. The restructuring changes some things, not everything. I'm not able to offer you a version of this that is simple or clean. I want to be honest about that before anything else. I know what you are, she said. I've known since Alex told me before the engagement party. I didn't walk away from that. Knowing it abstractly is different. You sound like me, she said. That's what I told Alex. Knowing in the abstract is different. He said I was right. A brief silence. You're quoting me, my brother, he said. It's a good point, regardless of who makes it. She turned to look at him. He turned to look at her at the same moment, which meant they were looking at each other directly for the first time since he'd arrived at the railing, and the November wind was pulling at her hair and his coat was open at the collar, and he looked like a man who had been through something difficult and was still in the process of coming out the other side, which she recognized because she looked the same way. I'm not the same as Alex, he said. What I have to offer is not a quiet house. It's not Sunday mornings without complications. I know. The work I do has consequences for people around me. For you, if you're around me. Pharaoh already put my name in a file, she said. That ship has sailed. Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile, the precursor to one. The thing that happened around his eyes before his mouth decided. That's not how I'd frame it. How would you frame it? He looked at her. I'd say you're already paying costs. And you should know that being further in doesn't necessarily mean the costs get proportionally worse. Some things become protected by proximity. Protected, she repeated. You'd have resources. People who would make sure the Pharaoh situation stayed closed. Insurance against the kind of leverage Thomas used. He paused. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you're trying to make a practical argument for something that isn't purely practical, she said. He looked at her steadily. Yes, that's what I'm doing. Why? Because the purely personal argument scares me, he said, and I'm better at practical. She looked at him. She thought about a man who had spent 30 years building walls around himself, not for cruelty, but for survival. Not because he didn't feel things, but because feeling things in his position was a liability he couldn't afford to carry visibly. She thought about all the rooms he had been in where people looked at him with calculation or fear or careful management, and how he had learned to read that and factor it in and proceed accordingly. She thought about standing in a dark hallway having kissed the wrong man and looking up into eyes that held none of those things, just recognition. The look of someone seeing something they were not expecting and not yet having decided what to do about it. Ask me the non-practical version, she said. He looked at the river for a moment. Then he looked at her. I think about you, he said, every day. Not strategically. Not because you represent something useful or because proximity to you helps me with anything. I think about He stopped. He was working harder than she'd seen him work at something, and the working at it was visible, which meant he was letting it be visible, which was its own form of the thing she was asking for. I think about the way you sat down across from Pharaoh, with your hands flat on the table and your coat still on and your voice completely level. I think about the way you looked at that wall in the dining room and didn't make anything of it, just absorbed it, moved on. He paused. I think about 8 seconds in a hallway. You counted them, she said. I counted them. The river moved underneath them. The city lit the water from both banks, reds and whites, and the specific amber of Chicago at night, warm despite the cold, the city's persistent argument that it was alive regardless of what the thermometer said. I told Alex, she said, about the hallway, about before I opened my eyes. I know, he told me. He looked at her. Was that true? Yes. He was quiet for a moment, a long moment, the kind that had mass to it. It was for me too, he said. She thought about Pharaoh saying people in his position don't have accidents. She thought about Vincent saying partly. She thought about the gap between those two things, the strategic truth and the full one, and what it cost a man like this to close that gap out loud, on a bridge in November, to a woman who might still walk away. She was not going to walk away. She had walked away from enough things in her life by increments, by the slow accumulation of partial truths and managed distances, and she was done with the incremental version. She had told herself she was going to make decisions as herself. And this was herself, standing on a bridge looking at a man who was complicated and dangerous and entirely incapable of performing kindness he didn't actually feel. I'm not a person who needs protecting, she said. I want you to understand that. I'm not looking for resources or insurance or someone to stand between me and hard things. I know, he said. You sat down across from Pharaoh. I sat down across from Pharaoh, she agreed. What I'm looking for is someone who doesn't ask me to be smaller than I am, who doesn't need me to perform a version of myself that fits into what they need from me. She looked at him. Every conversation we've had, you've said the difficult thing, the real thing, even when the real thing cost you something. Not always, he said. More than anyone else, she said. He looked at her. I know what I'm walking into, she said. I'm not naive about your world. I'm not going to pretend it's something it isn't, but I'm also not going to let Pharaoh's version of you, the pure strategy version, the man who doesn't have accidents, be the version I believe in. Because I've seen the other version 3 times now, and I think it's real. It's real, he said. It's just not something I know how to carry very well. I know, she said. I can see that. I'm not asking you to be good at it. I'm asking you to not go away. He looked at her for a long time. Then he reached out and took her hand. Not dramatically, not the movie version, not a gesture calibrated for effect. He just reached out and took her hand, the way you take something you've been wanting to take for a long time, and have finally decided the cost of not taking it is higher than the cost of what happens if you do. His hand was cold. Hers was colder. They stood at the railing with the river underneath them and the city burning against the November dark on both sides, and she felt the weight of his hand in hers, and it was not light, and it was not simple, and she did not want it to be either of those things. This is going to be difficult, he said. Yes, she agreed. There will be things I can't tell you. I know. And things that will be harder than you're anticipating. Vincent? She squeezed his hand once. I'm standing on a bridge in November holding hands with a man who controls a criminal empire and I'm not running. You can stop warning me. The precursor happened again, around his eyes first, the thing that came before. And then, slowly, the full version. She had not seen it before. The actual smile, unguarded, the one that had no management in it. It was briefer than she expected and completely different from the one she had seen on him before, not the controlled acknowledgement, not the slight curve that said noted rather than felt. Just a man, for a moment, without the architecture. It changed his face considerably. She filed it away as something she intended to see again. They walked, not toward anything in particular, just along the river, letting the city move around them, not talking constantly, talking when something needed saying. She told him about the terracotta paint in the back room. He told her that he was closing 2 of the less legitimate operations and restructuring into something with less exposure, which he said the way someone says a thing they have needed to say for a long time and are relieved to be saying. She asked if it was because of Thomas and the Pharaoh situation. Partly, he said, which was becoming, she thought, his most honest word. And the other part, she said. He looked at the river as they walked. I'm 43, he said. I've been doing this since I was 29. I took it because there was no one else and I didn't know how to want something I couldn't have, so I took the thing I could have and I made it work. He paused. I don't know what the other thing looks like. I have no template for it, but I think I've been wanting to find out for a while. What other thing? She said. He looked at her. A life, he said simply. Just a life. That isn't only this. She thought about Alex in the coffee shop, describing Sunday mornings and no agenda. The same longing in a different language. The Callahan boys, she thought. Their father had done a specific kind of damage that expressed itself differently in each of them. Alex running toward simplicity, Vincent running toward control, both of them finally, maybe, putting the running down. That's a reasonable thing to want, she said. Is it? He said, genuinely asking. Yes, she said. It is. They walked. In January, Alex left for Seattle. He texted her 2 days before he flew out. Not a long message. Alex had learned, maybe, to use fewer words for the things that mattered. It said, I want you to know I don't have bad feelings. It took me a while to get there. I'm there. She wrote back, take care of yourself. The quiet life is real. I believe that. He sent a single period in response, which she understood as acknowledged, and nothing more needs to be said. She showed the exchange to Vincent that evening over dinner in a restaurant near her office, a small Thai place that she liked for its particular noisiness, the way the clatter and conversation made a private bubble out of any table that wanted one. He read the texts and set the phone down and looked at his plate. He'll be okay, he said. I think so too. She picked up her fork. Are you? He looked at her. About my brother moving to Seattle and my former almost sister-in-law sitting across from me at dinner? Yes. He picked up his own fork. Ask me in 6 months. She smiled. That's what he said. Then maybe it runs in the family. She thought not for the first time that the Callahan brothers were more similar than either of them had spent any time being comfortable with. She did not say this. Some things were better discovered independently. The weeks that followed were not smooth. She had not expected smooth. Smooth was not the thing she'd been looking for. She had spent 2 years trying to maintain smooth, and it had cost her the incremental version of herself, the one that had slowly stopped fitting inside the shape she was holding. What the weeks were was real. Vincent disappeared for 4 days in February without explaining why, and came back looking like a man who had done something difficult and was not going to talk about it. And she gave him the space of it and asked no questions and made coffee. And he sat in her office on the client presentation couch with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands for about 15 minutes, and she let him. Later that night he told her, in the sparse language he used for things that cost him, that one of the restructuring decisions had required him to cut someone he had worked with for 12 years. He had a family, he said. What happened to him? She said. He's fine, he said. He's out of the organization. He's going to be fine. He looked at her. I made sure of it. She believed him. She also understood that this was the texture of it. Not dramatic violence, not the movie version, but the quieter weight of a man who made decisions that affected people's lives and carried the weight of those decisions without theatrical display. The weight was real. He carried it imperfectly, the way humans carried things, sometimes stoically, sometimes in her office with his face in his hands, sometimes in the specific flatness of his voice when he was talking about something that cost more than he was showing. She did not try to fix it. She did not manage it away or smooth it over. She was present with it, which was not the same as approving it, and he understood the distinction because he understood distinctions. That was one of the things about him. He understood distinctions. In March, she got a commission in New York. 6 months of work. High profile, the kind of project that would move her firm into a tier she had been working toward for 5 years. She told Vincent over the phone. He was in a meeting when she called, stepped out to take it, which she had come to understand was his version of making something a priority. New York, he said. 6 months. I'd come back on weekends when I could. A pause. You should take it. I know I should take it. I'm telling you. A slightly longer pause, the one that meant he was deciding what to say. I have business in New York approximately once a month, he said. That could work, she said. Yes, he said. It could. She took the commission. She was in New York on a Tuesday in April when her phone rang with Dara's name. I had dinner with him, Dara said without preamble. With Vincent? He came to Pilsen. He bought a ceramic bowl. He paid too much for it. A pause. He asked about your mother. Claire sat on the edge of the hotel bed. He went to your studio. He said he wanted to understand who the people in your life were. Dara's voice had the quality it got when she had assessed something and was deciding how much to give away. He's strange, Claire. He's very strange. I know. He doesn't do small talk. We sat in my studio for 40 minutes and he asked me 2 questions, and then he bought the bowl and left. What 2 questions? He asked how long I'd known you, and he asked if you were happy. The hotel room in New York was anonymous and clean. Outside the window, the city made its constant, indifferent sound. What did you tell him? Claire said. I told him 12 years. And I told him yes. A pause. You are. You know that. You seem like you don't always know that, so I'm telling you. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed in New York in April, and she looked at the window and she thought about a man who drove to Pilsen to buy a ceramic bowl and asked the people in her life if she was happy, because it mattered to him whether she was happy, and he did not know how to ask her directly, because asking her directly required a vulnerability he was still learning how to carry. She thought, he is not a simple thing to love. She thought, I have never particularly wanted simple things. I have wanted things I could manage. But managing things is not the same as loving them, and I have finally stopped confusing the two. She thought, the woman who walked into an engagement party in a dress with sewn-up pockets and held her hands clasped in front of her stomach because she had no good place to put them has been getting her pockets back one by one for 6 months, and this is what that feels like. Tell him, she said, that he could have just asked me. Dara laughed. Tell him yourself. He left his number. Said you'd know which phone he used. She looked at the clean phone on the nightstand. She picked it up. She typed, Dara says you asked if I'm happy. You could have just asked me. She put the phone down. She went to brush her teeth. When she came back, the clean phone had a message. Are you? She stood in the hotel room with wet hands and a toothbrush in one hand and the clean phone in the other, and she smiled. Not the managed version, not the one she'd been carrying like an offering for 2 years. The regular one. The version that her mother had said was the real version, the one that sounded like herself. She typed, yes. Ask me again in 6 months. She set the phone down. She looked at the New York window. The city moving outside it, constant and indifferent and alive, doing what cities did, continuing, without waiting for anyone to finish being afraid.